Welcome back to another episode of ColdstreamRodshop. I'm Derek Fraser. In this week's episode, we're finally getting back to working on the 40 Plymouth after all kinds of trials and tribulations and issues with the T5 transmission that we had. I mean, we went through the process of getting an S10 transmission, but unfortunately didn't have the right bolt pattern for us. So that transmission got sold back to the gentleman I bought it from. Then we took the Camaro transmission apart, and basically, the case was cracked. All of the internals were made from used parts, so basically it was junk. So what we wound up doing was finding another S10 case. We took what few Camaro good pieces there were, bought a whole bunch of new parts. We now have an S10 tail shaft, so our shifter is forward now. We've got all brand new and really good parts inside on this one. So basically this is ready to get a coat of paint and then bolt up to the 350 Chev engine, and then we'll get her back in the 40 Plymouth. Since the Plymouth has been sitting here for so long though, with all this dust, I'm gonna have to roll it out of the garage first and hose it down and clean it off and blow it off, because it's been sitting quite a while. So follow along, we're finally gonna get something done on the 40 Plymouth. Well, we're back on working on the 40 Plymouth. As I introduced earlier, we now have the Camaro T5 transmission with the S10 tail shaft onto it. So now we get our shifter in the right position. We've got the transmission all rebuilt with basically all new parts. I think the only thing we didn't replace was first, second, fourth, and fifth gear. Other than that, everything else was replaced. The input shaft, the cluster gear, I believe it's called, the one that runs along the bottom, and then the final end of it, we wound up having to replace the tail shaft, or the main shaft that comes out of the top of the transmission there. Once we had it all together, lo and behold, the thing was bent. Did not see that coming, so we had to rip it apart and put another main shaft or tail shaft into the transmission. So we're good to go. So anyways, I came back home, got this all painted up, as you can see right here. And then I decided, well, I'm going to trial fit the flywheel on the back of the engine. Now, this engine is a crate motor from Canadian Crate Engines, 350, 385 horsepower. This is the flywheel, along with over on the bench, we've got the clutch and everything that was supplied with the Camaro transmission. But like it has issues too, which we didn't foresee. Now, I'm not sure if everybody can see this, but this actually has two bolt patterns onto it, and it is not locating on the crank. So through a lot of investigation, what this turns out to be is that someone took a flywheel that would be like a post 86 350 or 305 engine that's got a one-piece rear main seal, and they machined out the ID and put the second bolt pattern into it so it would fit into a pre-86 350 engine that's got a two-piece rear main seal. Now, this thing probably vibrated when it was on the engine, because the post-86 flywheels have a counterweight here, and you can see on the back of the flywheel where it was actually mounted on a pre-86 two-piece rear main seal crank. So it couldn't have run well, whoever had this before. Anyways, it looks like, I shouldn't say it looks like, we are going to buy another flywheel, and we're just going to buy a new flywheel, a new clutch, a new disc and everything, so it's on its way. So unfortunately, we're stopped again putting the transmission over here onto the engine and putting that back in the chassis. So hopefully we'll get going here shortly. Hopefully we can have that all those parts in here soon, and we'll get her going again. So there's the engine all put together with the transmission and bolted back in the frame. New clutch, pressure plate, flywheel, throw bearing, pilot bearing, everything torqued in place. New bolts going from the transmission to the bell housing. Didn't show it in time lapse, but it's relatively straightforward. I didn't want to bore everybody with a time lapse on that, but got her all together, bolted to if there's a new transmission mount there as well. Everything's bolted into the engine mounts, or she's basically ready to go to the next step, which is exhaust. As I mentioned earlier, one of the things that we have to do for the 40 Plymouth is actually get a drive shaft made. Now, I know there's ways of taking like I don't know where it is. I think I've got an old drive shaft over here. We could probably take this old drive shaft, pound in some universals, maybe spin it on the lathe and get a cut to the right end. But I don't like messing around with it. You can get into vibration issues and everything else. So you can see the old drive shaft there. So what I chose to do, and I strongly recommend it to the gentleman that owns this, is that we bought a brand new yoke for the rear and a brand new yoke for the back. Now, one thing is with the 8.8 rear ends, they use 1330 universal joints, and the Chev uses a 1310 in the front. So in order to measure up this drive shaft, I've done it on other episodes, but essentially you put your yoke in, you put it in all the way, and then you pull it out an inch. So I've got a black mark that I put on the yoke right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a center to center measurement. So from the center of this bearing diameter here for the universal joint to the center of this rear yoke. So I'll make that measurement up. I will take this yoke and I will take that yoke with that measurement, and I'm going to go into a place called Driveline Services in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia here. There will be all kinds of places, you can get drive shaft made up. A lot of truck repair companies make them. Just Google your local area and see who makes drive shafts up. But I usually don't mess around with this. I like to get one made up and get it professionally balanced. Then I don't have to worry about any kind of vibration when this thing is all put together. So we're going to go tomorrow with that measurement with those two yokes, and we are going to order a drive shaft for the 40 Plymouth. Here's the exhaust system for the 40 Plymouth. What we used were some stainless steel block hugger headers. Picked them up off of Amazon, I think it was, for a pretty reasonable price. They came with collectors. Then we ran a 2¼ inch exhaust pipe. I bought a kit from a company called Lyell's in Ontario, Canada. I'm sure that you could buy something in the US or elsewhere. Basically, it consisted of 4 U-turns, 4 90 degrees and 4 45 degrees. So basically, cut and piece and bend and weld together. I've just used aluminized steel. I have the same thing on my Model A. It's lasted 9 years, and it looks like it's going to go another 9 years. For exhaust, for mufflers, we used the old Thrush turbo mufflers just to kind of give it a nostalgic sign. Nostalgic sound. I'm so sorry, I can't pronounce right now. It's been a long day. And then what I chose to do, instead of using the U-bolts, I use these band clamps here. The reason being, should the customer decide to change the mufflers out, these don't crimp them or destroy them, so you can actually take everything apart. The other thing I like to use these big rubber hangers. I use a double one up in the rear, and then here midway point I used a single one. That's basically a 5/16 piece of steel. Basically bend it up, weld it to the frame, weld it to the exhaust pipe. At least then, you can take it apart if you need to, without having to beat the crap out of everything. The choice on the rear was to basically have the exhaust exit out behind the rear tires. It's a fat fendered hot rod. We could have went straight out the back, or anyways, it still could be changed quite easily should the customer want to, turn it another 45 degrees one way or the other. Like I said, everything comes apart relatively easily, not like as if you use the U-bolts or something. And right there is what's left of the kit. So lots of cutting, lots of welding. I have one U-bend left. So there's not a whole lot left of it. So what I'm going to work on next is that I am going to run the emergency brake cables. I have the Ford ones here. Going to use the inner cable on those. Then I bought a universal kit here with a lot longer outer ones, and I can hook those up to the back of the brakes. I've got some clamps, a central mounting point, and then this piece here, which is what ties the cables together. So gonna go through that next and try and wrap up the chassis here. Next thing up was to hook up the emergency brake cables. One thing with this particular setup is that on the Ford 8.8-inch rear ends, they've got a special little clip that hooks around. I don't know if we can see it here or not. It hooks around a little section, like a little lever here. So you need this special end in order to hook your brakes up. So what I had to do was actually buy two Ford 8.8 emergency brake cables to get the inner ones, and then I bought a universal kit to get the outer cables, and then get all of this hardware we have here. So you've got the adjusters here, you've got this little clip that holds things together, and this little clevis. Right now I've only plumbed them up this far because I'm going to have to get the body on. The only way I could run the emergency brake cables was actually to form this loop. So this loop is going to go up inside the tunnel, and I'll use a clamp like this to screw it underneath the tunnel, so it'll clear the drive shaft, because you've got to come over. I didn't want to go under anything, I just wanted to go over it. Everything is in there nice and tight, nice and floppy. In the back we've got lots of clearance here. We've got we've got some coating here on them, so there'll be no chafing, and everything is like really secure. So the intention now, that's as far as we're gonna go with the emergency brake cables, because ultimately we're gonna be using this low car lever, which is gonna be mounted somewhere here on the floor. So once the body is on, this will get mounted to the floor, and we're either gonna use a cable to go from this point to this clevis, or we'll use a rod, but something strong to connect the two of them. The adjustment for the emergency cables is right here, and also the individual cables themselves, these here can be individually loosened or tightened up. So that's as far as we go with emergency brake cables on the chassis for now. What we're going to do now is switch over to the other side. On the other side, the new pull type slave cylinder came in, and I'm just in the process right now of hooking it up. So right there, that was the push type slave master cylinder we were going to use, and the plan had been was to mount it somewhere here, make a bracket and have it push on the clutch fork just like it does on like a stock Camaro or many of the other GM products. This is a GM, standard GM slave master cylinder or slave cylinder. I don't know if it was off a Blazer or a Chev 1500 truck or something. It was like 30 bucks or $28 was the ticket. The issue is that if I mount this right here, when the brake pedal goes down, it basically comes right down where it's going to mount. So that kind of forced us to change gears and basically go with a pull type slave cylinder. So I got this off of Amazon. It's a Woolwood one. I heard originally, or saw 6 or 8 years ago, they had issues with them, but Woolwood apparently solved it. So what I'm going to do is make a bracket to go on these two holes here of the transmission. This will mount to it, and then we've got a clutch flex line here, which is going to go from the clutch master cylinder up to, out of focus there, up to this point. So just in the process up there on the bench, I made up some little cardboard template. So I'm going to make a bracket up here. Hopefully we'll have this all mounted up for the end of the video. So here's my bracket that I made up for the clutch slave cylinder. Had some 3/16 plate steel. It's not tightened in just yet. I've just got it mocked in place. Got some 5/16 bolts holding it here. I think it's going to be good, but what I've got to do right now is basically charge it up with fluid and run the clutch a few times, see if there's any flex. If there is, then probably what I'll do is I'll basically put a little gusset going from here up to one of these bolts maybe, just to give it a little bit of extra strength. But that's it. That's the pull type slave master cylinder. I had to put a little 90-degree bracket over here so that everything clears and stayed out of the way, keeping the bleeder screw at the top. So everything's snugged in right now. So what I'm going to do tomorrow is I'm going to fill that up with fluid and then see if we can get her working. So I've got the clutch slave cylinder hooked up, got the lines in, and I managed to bleed it by myself. The bracket here is 3/16 plate. It doesn't appear to flex. I still might put a gusset on this later. We'll see, but anyways, hopefully we won't move the vehicle too much, but I'll demonstrate here. It's like it does the trick. The one thing I did notice, and I think what I'm going to have to do though, is I'm going to have to put a return spring. There's a little hole here into them. It looks like originally they had a return spring just to make sure that the fork comes back off of the throw-up bearing, so it's not always riding against the clutch. Have to sort out that kind of adjustment. But right now, functionally, we have a working clutch. So in this episode, we put the engine and transmission back in finally. We've got the exhaust system all run and hung. We've got the emergency brake cables in place. We did order the drive shaft. The local drive shaft service, they lost their guy. So what they do is they send out to Toronto, which is quite a ways away from here, to get the drive shafts built. So that'll be in next week. What I'm going to do now is there's a couple little odds and ends I have to do here on the chassis. I've got to get a couple plugs, the spring, paint that bracket. I'll work on that. And then what I'm going to do is go outside to start cleaning out the body and get that ready to come off of the trailer and ultimately come and sit on the frame here. So in next week's episode, we'll see where that all sits. We'll show you what we're doing with the 40 Plymouth. But that's it for this week. That's it. We finally got something pieced together on the 40 Plymouth. It's been a long haul. Took the video quite a while we started it probably 6 or 7 weeks ago, but because of delays, here it is. It's finally put together. So anyways, please like, share, tag, and subscribe. Let me know what you did, what you think about anything I did here, and we'll see you next week. Everybody take care and have a good week.